This is Tuesdays with Morrie, the Professor, Part 2. The Morrie I knew, the Morrie so many others knew, would not have been the man he was without the years he spent working at a mental hospital just outside Washington, D.C., a place with the deceptively peaceful name of Chestnut Lounge. It was one of Morrie's first jobs after plowing through a master's degree and a PhD from the University of Chicago. Having rejected medicine, law, and business, Morrie had decided the research world would be a better place where he could contribute without exploiting others. Morrie was given a grant to observe mental patients and record their treatments. While the idea seems common today, it was groundbreaking in the early 50s. Morrie saw patients who would scream all day, patients who would cry all night, patients soiling their underwear, patients refusing to eat, having to be held down, medicated, and fed intravenously. One of the patients, a middle-aged woman, came out of her room every day and lay face down on the tile floor, stayed there for hours, as doctors and nurses stepped all around her. Morrie watched in horror. He took notes, which is what he was there to do. Every day, she did the same thing. Came out in the morning, lay on the floor, stayed there until the evening, talking to no one, ignored by everyone. It saddened Morrie. He began to sit on the floor with her, even lay down alongside of her, trying to draw her out of her misery. Eventually, he got her to sit up and even return to her room. What she mostly wanted, he learned, was the same thing most people want: someone to notice she was there. Morrie worked at Chestnut Lodge for 5 years. Although it wasn't encouraged, he befriended some of the patients, including a woman who joked with him about how lucky she was to be there because my husband is rich so he can afford it. Can you imagine if I had to be in one of those cheap mental hospitals? Another woman who would spit at everyone else took to Morrie and called him her friend. They talked each day, and the staff was at least encouraged that someone had gotten through to her. But one day she ran away, and Morrie was asked to help bring her back. They tracked her down in a nearby store, hiding in the back, and when Morrie went in, she burned an angry look at him. "So you're one of them, too," she snarled. "One of who?" "My jailers." Morrie observed that most of the patients there had been rejected and ignored in their lives, made to feel that they didn't exist. They also missed compassion, something the staff ran out of quickly. And many of these patients were well off from rich families, so their wealth did not buy them happiness or content. It was a lesson he never forgot. I used to tease Morrie that he was stuck in the 60s. He would answer that the 60s weren't so bad compared to the times we live in now. He came to Brandeis after his work in the mental health field just before the 60s began. Within a few years, the campus became a hotbed for cultural revolution, drugs, sex, race, Vietnam protests. Abby Hoffman attended Brandeis. So did Jerry Rubin and Angela Davis. Morrie had many of these radical students in his classes. That was partly because instead of simply teaching, the sociology faculty got involved. It was fiercely anti-war, for example. When the professors learned that the students who did not maintain a certain grade point average could lose their deferments and be drafted, they decided not to give any grades. When the administration said, "If you don't give these student grades, they will all fail," Morrie had a solution. "Let's give them all A's," and they did. Just as the 60s opened up the campus, it also opened up the staff in Morrie's department. From the jeans and sandals they now wore when working to their view of the classroom as a living, breathing place. They chose discussions over lectures, experience over theory. They sent students to the Deep South for civil rights projects and to the inner city for fieldwork. They went to Washington for protest marches, and Morrie often rode the buses with his students. On one trip, he watched with gentle amusement as women in flowing skirts and love beads put flowers in soldiers' guns, then sat on the lawn, holding hands, trying to levitate the Pentagon. They didn't move it, he later recalled, but it was a nice try. One time, a group of black students took over Ford Hall on the Brandeis campus, draping it in a banner that read Malcolm X University. Ford Hall had chemistry labs, and some administration officials worried that these radicals were making bombs in the basement. Morrie knew better. He saw right to the core of the problem, which was human beings wanting to feel that they mattered. The standoff lasted for weeks, and it might have gone on even longer if Morrie hadn't been walking by the building when one of the protesters recognized him as a favorite teacher and yelled at him for coming in through the window. An hour later, Morrie crawled out through the window with a list of what the protesters wanted. He took the list to the university president, and the situation was diffused. Morrie always made good peace. At Brandeis, he taught classes about social psychology, mental illness, and health, group process. They relied on what you now call career skills and heavy on personal development. And because of this, business and law students today might look at Morrie foolishly naive about his contributions. How much money did his students go on to make? How many big-time cases did they win? Then again, how many business or law students ever visit their old professors once they leave? Morrie's students did that all the time, and in his final months they came back to him, hundreds of them from Boston, New York, California, London, and Switzerland, from corporate offices and inner-city programs. They called, they wrote, they drove hundreds of miles for a visit, a word, a smile. "I've never had another teacher like you," they all said. As with all my visits with Morrie go on, I begin to read about death, how different cultures view the final passage. There's a tribe in North American Arctic, for example, who believe that all things on Earth have a soul that exists in miniature form of the body that holds it, so that a deer has a tiny deer inside it, and a man has a tiny man inside him. When the large being dies, that tiny form lives on. It can slide into something being born nearby, or it can go on to a temporary resting place in the sky, in the belly of a great feminine spirit, where it waits until the moon can send it back to Earth. Sometimes, they say, the moon is so busy with the new souls of the world that it disappears from the sky. This is why we have moonless nights, but in the end, the moon always returns, as do we all. This is what they believe. That was Tuesdays with Morrie, the Professor, Part 2. And I'm sorry, my eyes are a little off. I'm wearing these contacts that aren't good. So, all right, thank you. But that was a good reading. So click the thumbs up button. It takes 2 seconds. And my name is Gregory Brandt. Check out my other channels too, and don't forget to subscribe and share this. If you haven't read this book, go ahead and check it out at your local library. Tuesdays with Morrie. It's a great book.